Thank you for downloading this podcast from the British Theatre Guide. For more information about British Theatre Guide, please visit britishtheatreguide.info.
Kate Mosse has spent more than a decade teaching script development in London as the founder of the Criterion New Writing programme, based at the Criterion Theatre in the heart of London's West End. As a writer, he has written and produced 25 plays and musicals at venues including Chichester Festival Theatre, Portsmouth Guildhall and Worthing Theatre. And his novel The Coming Fire, the third in a series he began writing during lockdown, has just been published by Moonflower Books. He also happens to be married to internationally best-selling novelist Kate Mosse. I caught up with Greg just before his latest book was released in July 2025. After writing over 25 plays and musicals and running theatre script development programs, why, in this case, is it a novel or 3 novels?
I know. It's a terrifying thought, isn't it? So many novels so quickly. Yeah. If I add them all up, it will, by the end of the summer, it'll actually be 9 novels since coronavirus. And that's the story, because I had 2 productions on my slate that we thought at first postponed and then obviously were cancelled due to the lockdowns when it became illegal for us to get together and enjoy live theatre, right? So instead of taking those 2 productions forward, I sat in the chair in the corner of my study, where you can see quite a number of the jackets of my novels, but also, perhaps more importantly in this context, posters from my plays. Yeah. I sat in my IKEA Poang chair in the corner with my laptop on my lap, and I started writing The Coming Darkness. I didn't know it at the time that I was going to, very foolishly, write 170,000 words of future dystopian novel. But in the end, that worked out well because my publisher was very pleased with The Coming Darkness once I'd found one, and they wanted a second book, but they didn't want The Coming Darkness to be quite so long. So I took out about 70,000 words and moved them into The Coming Storm, which is book 2. Right. When it came to book 3, of course, I had to make it all up, which was considerably harder work. Yeah. But the Coming Fire is also, in the end, 98,000 words. So they're all the same length, and they're all sort of standalone thrillers in that sense. But obviously, whether people go to the library or get the e-edition or the bookshop edition, it's most fun to get the whole world of all 3 books. Yeah, yeah. I mean, we were all being made to feel guilty if we hadn't recreated the entire works of Shakespeare during lockdown, but you did actually turn it to your advantage. I was reading the summary of the first book, and it does sound rather like a lockdown model, a double threat of rising temperature and new diseases threatening public health. It's got the situation in the world at the time must have fed into that. Yeah, we're all incredibly, as creative writers, we're all influenced by what's around us, aren't we? Yeah, yeah. Or if, like my wife, Kate Mosse, who writes brilliant historical adventures, she's influenced by the thing that, I don't know, perhaps the gravestone that she comes across in Franschhoek in South Africa, or maybe that monument to the victims of the Nazis in Carcassonne in the Second World War. And out of that inspiration, some focus, that is what it is, isn't it, David? It's an intense focus that generates ideas. Yeah. So for me, it's not surprising that in those circumstances, but at the same time, and I know that you'll understand this as a creative person, I didn't want it to be reportage, and that's why I moved it into the future. Yeah, yeah. 15 years hence, everything we're worried about will be more urgent, more dramatic, more desperate. So, yeah. So it was the first novel, and obviously the publishers were quite happy for you to write a second and now a third. So the first one must have gone down quite well, did it? I know. That's so lucky, isn't it? Yeah. I was literally very lucky that I got 2 superb quotes for the cover, one from Anthony Horowitz and another one from Lee Child. Yeah. And Lee's quote was very interesting because he compared it to John le Carré. And I think the thing that he was picking up on there was the fact that my hero, Alex, isn't certain if the orders he's being given are benign. Right. So Alex is, at the beginning of The Coming Darkness, he's sent to Norway to infiltrate a genetic biotech research company. And of course, on the way there, he thinks that he's doing something for good, and subsequently he discovers he's done something for bad.
Yeah.
And that means that he has to find the connections with other potential bad actors. It's the same in theatre, isn't it? What we're looking for is to present these scenes of drama to the audience, and to get the audience to make the connections for themselves between them.
Yeah.
And in a way, in a novel, because it's got this the internal monologue of the hero, whether it's first or third person, you actually see that avatar of the reader's imagination making the connections.
Yeah.
Whereas in theatre, we don't have that, or seldom do we have a voiceover. So we're much more, the space we leave between the scenes is that vital area of engagement where the the audience's imagination completes the play for us, which is, I think, one of the things that makes writing for theatre very difficult, but also incredibly satisfying.
Yeah. I was talking to a writer local to me here in Manchester a few weeks ago, and he's just written, he's been writing for TV for decades, and he's just written his first novel. And he said, I said, there's a lot of words in a novel, isn't there, compared to a play? He said, he can knock out like a soap opera script in a couple of days, but a novel is a completely different prospect. I mean, was it daunting for you, switching to novels?
It didn't feel like it. I think, so you're obviously very well researched because you've been doing this podcast for ages. I've got nearly 30 years of background in supporting writers create novels and plays and screenplays. So I've been practicing at that moment in coronavirus when I sat in my chair on my own with a blank screen in front of me.
Yeah.
I've been practicing for 25 years what I refer to as the knack of invention.
Yeah.
This happens, and I've got 2 or 3 other things that can happen as a consequence, all in the back of my mind, and I just have to choose.
Yeah.
And that comes from the fact that when helping somebody develop their script, we're not trying to, you or I doing it, we wouldn't be trying to fix their script. We'd be trying to embellish, elaborate, get it to achieve its full potential.
Yeah, yeah.
So we're not saying, no, you can't have that. We're saying, yes, if you've got that, then these 2 or 3 other things might work for you.
Yeah.
And anyway, so what that means is that if I write a 1-act play, it's perhaps 12,000 words. If I write a 2-act play, it's 20,000 words. Same for a screenplay, about 20,000 words, maybe a bit more. And my cozy crime novels are about 85,000 words, and these thrillers 100,000. Or 98, 99. So it is significantly longer, but that's only a question of stamina. That only means you sit in your chair for longer. It doesn't, Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've been writing some lyrics recently, and you can write for 2 or 3 days or more and produce, well, a page, if that. But I find that harder than writing a script.
David, the writing of lyrics is just so satisfying.
It is, yes, yeah. When it goes well, yeah. And demoralizing when it doesn't.
Yeah, but you know as well as I do that eventually it will go well. You'll find that missing link. I've worked with writers of musical theatre, and I've written musicals with a composer partner because I can write melodies, but I can't do all the other dots.
Yeah.
I find it incredibly rewarding. If ever I'm in a context where I'm teaching people to do it, I used to teach an MA in creative writing for the University of Sussex. So I wrote the program, and I included drama and I included poetry, and obviously there's that interconnection. Anyway, cut a long story short. In a song, there's a dialogue between the sense of the words and the sound of the words, and obviously the sound of the music. And that includes sometimes silence, pauses, instruments dropping out and leaving a single note from a high violin or whatever it is. And those 3 things, they work together, don't they?
Yeah.
But if you or I are writing just the lyrics to start with, we know all of that other stuff is going to happen later.
Yes.
And in a sense, we leave space for the actor and the musician's or the composer's interpretation, don't we?
Yeah.
We leave space within the lyrics. We don't have to say everything. Yeah, incredibly satisfying. And I because I'm so busy with novels just now, I do miss it. And I've got a show that I'm itching to write, but I can't allow myself currently to turn my mind.
Focus.
It's so hard, isn't it?
It is,
split focus.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I mean, as a writer, I'm sure you've had that a lot of writers have had, where people have come up to you and said, I've got this great idea for a play or for a story or for a novel or something. And I teach, it's the idea that's the easy part. Ideas are everywhere. It's after the idea that's the real hard work of being a writer, isn't it?
Totally agree. You can't sell an idea.
No.
Right? You can sell a script, or you can sell your time working on something, I suppose. But no, the idea for itself. So, for example, I was talking to a colleague of mine who's responsible for the Noel Coward estate.
Yeah.
And I just said to him in passing, does anybody ever come to you and say, I'd like to write a follow-on to Private Lives or The Vortex or whatever it might be?
Yeah.
And if they did, what would your answer be? And so point one is nobody ever does, which is weird, isn't it?
It is
How
really,
much
yeah.
people, like people love a sequel, don't they? And the idea of having the later experiences of the characters played by Noel Coward and Gertrude Lawrence in Private Lives, that would be incredible, wouldn't it? What a great show, and it would have songs and humour and so on. And then, so the answer to the second part is that it wouldn't be discounted out of hand.
Right.
So it's coming back to your question of if the idea for the follow-on for Private Lives was a good one, you could share that, and then the producer or director or rights holder, whoever it is you're talking to, they might say, come back to me in 6 weeks with something a bit more fleshed out.
Yeah.
And then you're on the way, aren't you? So the idea can be like the key that unlocks a door, but it doesn't mean they let you in.
Yeah. Yes. And then you've got to expand that. I mean, you were saying about Kate, she starts with this small thing. Your novels, they seem to take in big questions, huge world-affecting events. Is that fair?
Yeah, I'm often asked if it's been advantageous to me in any way to be married to an internationally best-selling author, and of course, my usual reply is that she is the wave that I surf.
Yeah.
So yes. The other thing is that, so for example, one of Kate's novels, Citadel, comes from the discovery of the murder of a bunch of French resistance operatives.
Yeah.
On the eve of Carcassonne being handed back to the French and the Nazis retreating to Germany.
Yeah.
Which is a terribly spiteful act of war. And she discovered it from a specific monument in a specific location outside the city. But of course, from that, she, writing historical adventure, she wrote a novel of 140,000 words or so. So that's 7 2-act plays.
Yeah.
Which is obviously not limited to that small discovery from a moment in history, because that moment in history doesn't happen until near the end of the book.
Yeah.
And so you've read 120,000 words about the circumstances that lead to her first inspiration without knowing, as a reader, what that first inspiration was. So that sort of creative integrity, creative stamina, editorial awareness, all of those things I learned from looking at, in terms of novel writing, I learned from seeing how she works.
Yeah. You've sort of invaded on each other's territory in a way, because she's started adapting. She adapted one of her own novels for the theatre, and she's done a bit of performing herself, while you've gone into her territory of theatre. So
yes, the adaptation of The Taxidermist also was an incredibly exciting thing, and I don't know if you've ever been to Chichester Festival Theatre, but it's a sort of prototype of the Olivier at the National. It's that big fan-shaped auditorium with more than 1,200 seats. And so writing for that great big space with a massive thrust stage that comes down, because the building's hexagonal, the thrust stage comes down to a point in the center of the stalls. So if you stand on that point, you are standing on what's known as the Olivier point. Because Laurence Olivier founded his company that was to become the National Theatre at the Old Vic in London.
Yeah.
But his first seasons were at Chichester Festival Theatre.
That was like the prototype for it, really, wasn't it?
Exactly. And if you want to dominate that vast auditorium, not in a bad way, in a good way.
Yeah.
That's the spot that you have to find. You've got to find your way to that spot meaningfully in the drama that you're acting.
Yeah.
There's got to be that authentic reason for being in this place and addressing the whole house. And so that's the sort of thing that she was able to work with when she adapted The Taxidermist's Daughter.
Yeah.
Which did something crazy like 85% business for over its run. It was amazingly successful.
Yeah. So as two writers in the same house, do you talk about your work, or are you separate in your own little caves working solo?
And now your podcast listeners won't be able to see my cave, but you can see it.
Yes.
And it is clearly mine. Right? It's not a shared cave. I'm reminded of Nicky Gerard and Sean French, who write thrillers under the name Nicky French.
Yeah.
Right, and very successfully. And I know that Nicky, who I've seen at a festival, being asked, essentially, are you like two pianists on the same keyboard? And of course they're not. That doesn't make any sense, does it?
Yeah.
We sometimes, but very rarely, will discuss an idea that we've got brewing, and not in any depth, because the discovery of the story is an intensely personal thing.
Yeah.
Anthony Burgess, who wrote A Clockwork Orange and many other books, he once said that you could spend the energy and motivation to write a book in one drunken conversation at the pub.
Yeah.
You spill it all out.
Yeah.
And the next morning you think, I'm not interested in that anymore.
Yeah.
Somehow you've spent it. So it's not that we're jealous of our ideas, because we do share a lot of ideas, but when it comes to it, she's the first person to read a complete draft of a play or a novel that I write, and vice versa. But we don't brew them together. Does that make sense, David?
But do you find yourselves good editors of each other's work?
Well, because of all this work that I've done with other people, I think I am good at that, especially the generation of new story part of it. And I used to work in publishing, so I'm quite good at proofreading and so on.
Yeah.
Whereas Kate, before she was a writer, progressed from being a junior editor to being an editorial director. So she has that old school. We're both in our early 60s, Kate and I. So she has that old school classical training in the art and craft and business of publishing. Yeah. So, incredibly helpful. Yeah.
You have actually, I noticed, you've co-written a few of your theatre works. So you have worked with other people, which is quite unusual, apart from, like you've said, with music and lyrics, the musical. So how has that worked for you, co-writing?
Well, one of them was incredibly important. That was back in 2018. And I was helping an author on my MA program to write a novel based in this wonderful story of the London buses that went to the First World War. And they provided troop transport and mobile communication. Some of them, in fact, had homing pigeons on them. And what would happen is they would set up a location, then the bus would go off with the homing pigeons on board. And then when the pigeons were released, they would go back to that HQ behind the lines, carrying amazing. And they had these incredibly reliable but rudimentary chug-chug engines, because we're talking about the 1910s. Yeah. Anyway, a huge number of them went to the war, like about 1,000 of them. And the novelist, Carol Godsmark, I said to her one day, this would make a great 2-act play. And it would be about your lead character, Jim, in Act 1. And the last line of Act 1 would be him changing out of his bus driver's uniform into a military uniform at conscription or volunteering. And the last line would be, all change, please.
Yeah.
And that's the end of Act 1. Then Act 2 is his experience at war and what he finds when he comes home. And that's a lovely structure for a 2-act play. And she said, yes, but I've never written a play. And I said, well, I can help with that.
Yes.
So that was how that one came. Another one, I wrote a show with Lucy Flannery, who's a very gifted, skillful, experienced writer, who actually came to me and said, so she lives quite local to me in a place called Emsworth on the south coast. And she said, I've got these 4 or 5 local history stories, each of which I think would make a good play. Would you like to collaborate on one of them? And if so, which? And the one that I liked best was about the oyster industry. Hundreds of thousands of oysters used to go from Emsworth to London every week.
Yeah.
And they farmed them in this beautiful bay, clean sea water. And what happened was the municipality started pumping untreated sewage into the bay and destroyed the industry. But before they did, they contaminated the oysters. And there was a huge scandal when a number of very important people fell ill and some even died from the contamination of the oysters. So between us, Lucy and I created this story of a set of individual characters who were not the drivers of that broader narrative, but whose lives were impacted by it. So it's a true play that derives from character and interpersonal conflict, but it also carries that wider story. And if I just go on for a moment, like the technical way in which it happened was I wrote an outline that must have been about 700 or 800 words. Then she wrote a first draft. Then I wrote a second draft. Then she wrote a third draft, which we got an actress that we've employed several times on other shows to read to us, made a bunch of notes, and then together we revised that fourth draft and we took that into rehearsal. I suppose the most important thing to say about that sequence, I know I'm going on about this a bit, but it is an interesting sequence, I think, is that we never went backwards, David.
Right.
We never said, like, my draft. Lucy said, well, I don't like that, Greg. Can we not go back to what I wrote the previous time? It was always, we just kept moving it forward.
Yeah.
Because we could always see the reasons for a refinement, an elaboration, or a change. Yeah, so finally on that point, because I've worked as an editor and a story development helper so much, it doesn't seem odd to me to share that creative process.
Right. Is there anything you think is too big for to go on stage, or is it a matter of just finding a theatrical way of telling a story?
So a really great example of this is a show that was premiered in the Minerva Theatre, which is the 300-something seat studio theatre at Chichester, also a thrust stage, a good number of years ago now, to which my son Felix, or our son Felix, was invited because he was a member of the CFT Youth Theatre.
Right.
And the play wanted an audience. It had been through 12 drafts, I think. It had a very gifted director and a very willing writer, Lucy Preble, and the topic was the financial crash of 2007-8, but from the point of view of the disastrous investment vehicle Enron.
Yes.
And that was the title of the show.
I remember it, yes.
Yeah. And because Felix went, I happened to see it that same night, which is sort of Friends of the Theatre, partially invited audience and the youth theatre and so on. And it was absolutely riveting because it was that total theatre style in which, so a good example is when the play explained through a kind of montage transition the way in which subsidiaries were set up, which also had subsidiaries, in order to conceal the debt, the ballooning debt that could never, and they were played by actors who were essentially puppeteers, being dinosaurs, eating one another in a chain, so that you could no longer tell where has the debt gone. Nobody knows anymore.
Yeah.
But at the heart of it, of course, were a set of people who, driven by greed, destroyed the lives of other people who are also on stage. That interpersonal drama that's expressed in emblematic scenes of conflict. So you can see the whole story in 8 or 10 of the scenes of the show, somehow encapsulate the whole story, but all surrounded by this wonderfully inventive theatrical language.
Yeah. It's trying to represent accountancy theatrically. It's quite a challenge, really, isn't it?
Yeah, imagine it. Yeah, imagine it. But at the same time, you've got Lehman Brothers, which is essentially 3 intercut monologues.
Yeah,
which is also a gripping and compelling piece of theatre.
Yeah,
and I was very fortunate to be at a festival last year, and I met Simon Russell Beale and talked about the genesis of that show. And he told me about the rehearsals in which the discussion arose. Well, we don't actually need a cast of 14 for this. We don't need a cast of 8. No, we don't need a cast of 6. And eventually it was pared down to those 3 intercut monologues. But I guess you do need, obviously, a wonderful script, a brilliant story that stands behind that script. And then you need some of the best actors of your generation, don't you?
Well,
we don't always have that available.
Yeah. So you've been working in new writing in theatre for a long time. What are the opportunities now for writers in theatre? Has that changed over the time you've been working in theatre? What's the situation like?
Yeah. So my particular focus on the Criterion New Writing program, which takes place on stage in the West End at Piccadilly Circus at the Criterion Theatre. I mean, people will have seen adverts for Titanic, which is currently playing there, or when we set up the creative writing program, the playwriting program, it was 39 Steps was on stage.
That was on there for years, wasn't it?
I think it was 9 years in the end. Yeah, super, like great tourist show, David, but also for your regular theatre goer, great show. So, anyway, I happened to know a close friend of mine was a member of the board of the Criterion Theatre Trust. Like many theatres, its managing company is a charity with an educational mission alongside its business function. And Peter Clayton, my friend, he said to me, there's a missing link in theatre, which is people who are mid-career, they're established, they might have had 5 or 6 shows, and what do they do next? Who's going to... I said, well, Criterion Theatre, on stage, program, let them live and breathe that environment, and maybe they'll write a brilliant 2-act show for the West End.
Yeah.
And he said, well, that sounds like a good idea, so can you write me something for that? So I wrote a 1-page executive summary, as we call it in business, right? And I took it into the managing director of the Criterion Theatre Trust, and we talked it through with Peter, and we said we'd trial it. And what I wrote, so I'm very experienced as a teacher by this time, so I felt secure in what I was putting forward. We created a program that was a 2.5-hour on-stage session every 2 weeks, 6 sessions. So the whole program takes 12 weeks. There's lots of shared writing and note-giving in between the sessions. There are 6 writers on stage with us. And for sessions 3, 4, 5, and 6, there's actors reading the brand new scenes live on stage in the Italianate auditorium of the Criterion Theatre.
Yeah.
So the short answer to your question is there's very little for mid-career playwrights.
Yeah.
And there's a huge range of opportunities for what's generally called new writers. And sometimes I have to remind people that it's called Criterion New Writing because the writing's new, not the writers.
Yes. Yeah.
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 And I think that's an issue.
Yeah.
Sometimes I get asked to write references or to advise people who've been offered a place on a writing master's. And it's always quite a tricky conversation because that's expensive in terms of, money, but also time and energy and time out of a career and so on. And I always try and get the person who's considering it to weigh up that balance. This time, energy, and money, am I better served ploughing my own furrow and putting on another show?
Yeah.
Or 2 or 3. After all, it's a year. Yeah. And taking more steps of my own under my own steam. I think it would be great, wouldn't it, if we could all be taken under the wing of a wealthy benefactor or producer or director or venue. But that doesn't happen very often. And it's easy to accumulate a lot of scripts in the bottom drawer of your desk. And it's much better if you're constantly putting stuff out there and properly learning what works, what doesn't.
Yeah. There's something else as well. I remember there was an initiative here in Manchester about 10 years ago where they put a night out of short plays that were written by exactly the people that you're talking about, mid-career playwrights, just to try to solve that. But it only seemed to last one production. But I was talking to Jake Murray of Elysium Theatre, based in the northeast of Manchester. His father was Brian Murray, who founded the Royal Exchange Theatre in Manchester.
Amazing.
And he was talking about second productions of plays, which is another thing that we don't see that many of, even if it's something that's a big hit on the West End. There's only a very small number of them then go on to a regional production.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about that?
I think that whole one and done is really sad.
Yeah.
Yeah. You do need you need passion behind the show, don't you? So, for example, as we were coming out of lockdowns at the Criterion, so with 35% audiences was sold out, very hard work to make it work. We had a superb, not satire exactly, but sort of fast treatment of Pride and Prejudice called Pride and Prejudice, sort of.
Yeah.
And its characters were the servants in the households, telling with wry humour the story of what the posh people, the wealthy people were getting up to. And it was a great show, very, very successful. And it was there for as long as the producers could run it with those reduced houses. And it had already played, I think, first in Glasgow. And then after the Criterion, it was on tour. I think it might still be on tour.
It is, I think, yeah.
Yeah, so it will go out and then it will rest and it will go out again. Interestingly, I had a conversation, a play with songs that my composer partner and I have written, which my theatre writing agent is talking to a Korean producer about. The musical theatre market in Korea, people love good tunes, and that's what John, my partner, and I, that's what we try and do. Good tunes, great, intricately rhymed lyrics, and so on. But what the model there would be to try and make a success of the show with cast A for a limited run, bring it back next year with another cast who are like the way in which the revival is marketed.
Yeah.
So the biggest names that they can find, and then do it again.
Yeah.
And then do it again. And each time saying, you saw this show, you loved it, now see it with these new people.
Yes. Yeah.
Which it's an interesting sort of different model, isn't it?
Yeah.
Anyway, that's another alternative to the whole one and done thing. So the first one I was talking about was, you get the show to the West End and it's a big success. It can then tour. It could then come back, obviously.
Yeah.
Again, at the Criterion, we had 222, which is a ghost story play with some brilliant sort of jump scares and, in fact, very, very tricky from the point of view of health and safety because it needed moments of real darkness.
Yeah.
And the theatre had to get special permission to turn off briefly the emergency exit signs.
Yeah.
So there was full darkness. That's interesting, isn't it?
Yes.
And that's a show that's come back with, I suppose, what we'd call stunt casting. So the version that I saw had Tom Felton in it, who's, famous film star, and he was excellent. And then the next run of it, which was somewhere on Shaftesbury Avenue, had somebody else super famous, but in a different role.
Yeah.
And that's interesting too, isn't it? If you've got access to superstars.
Yes. Yeah. But a lot of regional theatres don't necessarily have that. And you do see some, like 39 Steps has been done at pretty much every regional theatre over the past few years.
Yeah, it's clever So it's a reduced cast of only 4, isn't it?
Yeah.
And yet they do all of those brilliant things. And then there's a really good joke in Act 2 where one of the cast members, there appear to be 5 characters simultaneously on stage, but one of them's like a hand puppet.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's a sort of meta joke, isn't it? That, okay, we couldn't manage this without 5 characters, but here on my hand is the 5th one.
Yeah, yeah. So this is your 3rd novel in a series.
Yeah.
Is it a trilogy, or is it just brings to mind the Douglas Adams line, the 5th in an increasingly inappropriately titled Hitchhiker's Guide trilogy? Is it going to carry on?
No, I don't. Well, okay, so here's the thing. If the publisher is happy with the performance of the 3rd book, The Coming Fire, then I can write the aftermath story,
right,
which in my head is called After the Fire, which is essential. So because it's a future dystopian thriller in which terrible things happen, but my hero, Alex Lamarck, prevents the very worst things from happening, there is a survivor story. So no spoilers, but I can give that away for free.
Right.
Some people survive.
Right.
And they need, after this terrible climax in which there is a mitigated triumph for our hero, if they want to get home, to achieve safety, to find out who else has survived, well, that would be After the Fire, and that would be a 4th volume.
Right.
It's interesting that we can make the comparison again, Dave, between novel writing and theatre. If Justin Oderbert, for example, at Chichester Festival Theatre puts on your show, it probably means he won't put mine on, and vice versa, right? There's a limited budget, limited energy, limited time, all of that. And it's the same in novel writing. If my publisher, Moonflower Books, publishes a 4th book, turning it from a trilogy into a quartet, well, that means they're not publishing some other thing that they could put in their schedule. It's a terrifying thought, isn't it? That whatever you do creatively, you're competing for limited resources in a limited space.
And you don't necessarily know who you're competing with. Absolutely
not. We recently, I say we, my son Felix, who is a really brilliant performer, so he was playing Marius in Les Miserables in the West End when the lockdown, and on tour for Cameron Mackintosh when the lockdowns happened. And when all of that came to an end, he decided he didn't want to go back into that 8 shows a week routine. And he works with me on the Criterion New Writing program, and he's also got a publishing deal for a trilogy of novels that starts coming out next year. So he and I working together is a fantastic boon, and we can sort of share ideas with one another as well. And we have this, what would you call it? We have this shared awareness that you've only got one life, right? Yeah. And if you carried on in Les Mis singing Marius, well, there isn't a lot of energy left for anything else at the end of each week of that.
Yeah.
And so you like the theatre, like the venue, like the producer, you got to choose where are you going to put your energy.
Yeah. Like when I did an MA in script writing many years ago, and one of the tutors on that used to write for soaps. He wrote for The Archers and he wrote for Brookside, and he said, when you're doing that, there is no time and no energy left to write anything of your own. So he had to get out.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, I suppose, isn't it, for an actor?
Yeah, it's tough. And of course, because of the nature of the writing industry, Felix and I have worked with quite a few playwrights who also are screenwriters. And typically they'll be working on continuing drama on TV. That's where most of the opportunities are. So that would include soaps like Casualty, Holby, EastEnders, and so on. But also the new shows and in the new market for the Netflix and other streamers. We actually had one really fascinating experience where one of the writers we'd worked with submitted a full 2-act script of a show set in about 1600 in the court of Elizabeth I. as a writing sample, which got them a job on not one but 2 contemporary Netflix dramas.
Yeah.
But the commissioners, they saw something in that brilliant 2-act script.
Yeah.
They saw something that made them think, yes, this writer can do this job for us.
That was the calling card.
It's great, isn't it?
Yeah.
You never know what's going to work.
No.
And you have to keep saying yes to things, right?
Yes.
Or nothing happens.
Yeah. So is there anything you've said yes to that you can talk about that's coming up apart from this new book?
Okay, so it is super exciting for me that when I say our, that's my composer partner, John Gledler, and I, our jazz swing musical Separate Ways, which we've produced ourselves a couple of times and had, very happy audiences. My writing agent is currently talking to producers and directors about that show. I think it's an interesting story. Tell me if it's not. Now, when I first wrote it, so what happens is 3 people, 2 women, one man, play with songs. It's almost sung through, actually. It is a musical. They meet, fall in love in all the combinations of 2 out of 3, and then go their separate ways. And I wrote it as a 1-act drama where that's the end of Act 1.
Yeah.
But in the back of my mind, there was always this idea that it would be a 2-act show. And it was actually, I wasn't writing it for people of 30 and 35. I was writing it for people of 45 or 50 or 55 who in Act 2, they come back together many years later. So in Act 1, they're singing about their younger selves.
Yeah.
And they're reenacting those moments in time. And I managed to complete that script and worked with John and polished up the songs. And we've got studio demos for songs from Act 1 and Act 2. So we finally got it into the position where Caroline Underwood, my theatre agent, is able to take it out and offer it to producers and directors and venues and see if anybody's interested. Obviously, it's great when people are interested, but how interested are you? Will you make it happen?
Yeah. Yeah. So hopefully that's to come, and the new novel.
Exactly. That's what I'm hoping for. By the way, if the Criterion New Writing program, which happens in London, our sessions are 12 till 2:30, and I organised it like that so that people who don't live in London can travel off peak and get into the West End and get and we also offer a modest travel budget for people who come from out of town. We welcome, I'm regional, I live in Sussex in the south of England, but we welcome regional applicants to the program, albeit it's in the West End in the centre of London. Your listeners can find me on my website, which is gregmosse.com, and they can see how to apply for next year's program should they wish to do so. Just to reiterate, it's a program for mid-career playwrights, so people who've had a few shows, even if they're small productions. And our goal is to encourage people to write well-made 2-act plays of the sort of thing that you might see in the West End.
Greg Mosse's novel The Coming Fire was published by Moonflower Books on the 17th of July 2025. For more information, see www.moonflowerbooks.co.uk or Greg's own website, www.gregmosse, that's GREGMOSSE.com. You can find out more about the Criterion New Writing Programme, including how to apply, at www.criterion-theatre.co.uk. Applications for the 2026 programme will open on the 1st of September 2025.
You've been listening to a podcast from British Theatre Guide. For more information, please visit britishtheatreguide.info.